Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2026 ICPSR Data Fair at Love Data Week. We're happy to have you join us today for the webinar titled A Reintroduction to the Social Media Archive, New Website, New Features, New Data. And now I'd like to welcome our presenter, Didar Islam, who is a data project assistant with the Social Media Archive at ICPSR. I'll turn it over to you, Didar.
Thanks, Chloe. Hello, everyone. It is a great pleasure to be here with all of you today. And thanks, Allison and Chloe, for hosting and co-hosting this webinar. Thank you all so much for joining me today for this Love Data Week presentation on reintroduction to the Social Media Archive, where I will walk through our new website, new features, new data that are now available through SOMAR. My name is Didar, and I am a data project assistant with the Social Media Archive here at ICPSR. The next slide. To start things off, I'll give a quick high-level overview of the Social Media Archive and the role that it plays in supporting social media research. Then I'll share a few highlights that would show Social Media Archive's impact and global reach, and some of the ways the researchers are engaging with our data. After that, I will walk through our technology ecosystem, including the website transition, the data deposit process, and the virtual data enclave. I'll also explain the data access workflow and then share some updates for those who are interested in Meta Content Library API. And I'll wrap things up by talking about our partners and collaborators. So next, just to give you all a quick overview of SOMAR and the people behind it, this is our public-facing SOMAR stuff, which means these are the folks you'll most likely interact with if you reach out to us with any questions you might have, or when you apply for data access or deposit data with us. Our director is Dr. Libby Hemphill, and we have Allison Sweet as our senior data project manager, who was also kind enough to host this webinar. And we have Marty Colt as another senior project manager, Tessa Coleman, and myself are data project assistants, and we support a lot of the day-to-day work, including user support, applications, data access workflows, and things like that. And we also have Shin-Chen Zhu as our data engineer. But I would also want to acknowledge that SOMAR's work is supported by our partners across multiple ID teams here at ICPSR and collaborators across the University of Michigan, who all help us with a lot of the behind-the-scenes work. So now I want to talk a little bit about some of the data we have available in SOMAR, just to give you all a sense of the kinds of things you can actually find in the Social Media Archive. So we host a pretty wide range of data that comes from social media platforms and the data that's about social media more broadly. And one of the first data sets we made available through SOMAR was the US 2020 Facebook and Instagram election study. And this came out of a partnership between Meta and a group of academic researchers across the US. And the goal here was really to understand how Facebook and Instagram might have influenced key political attitudes and behaviors during the 2020 election. And there's a lot that's packed into this data set. It includes data on user behavior on Facebook and Instagram. It has a lot of survey data. It also comes with replication code, So you can either replicate the original study or build new projects on top of it in order for you to be able to explore how people's behavior or engagement may have changed or shifted over the course of the election cycle. So I also want to note that this isn't a static collection. We have continued to publish new US 2020 data sets. So if you have looked at this study before, it's worth taking another look to see what's been added recently. Another major data sets we have is the Meta Content Library, which is really a very large collection of public content that includes posts from Facebook pages, from Facebook groups and events, as well as, content from Instagram accounts, business accounts, and creator accounts. And I'll talk more about meta content library later in the presentation. But one thing I want to highlight here is that there are two different ways to work with this data. And this, I think, is an important piece of information because it will come up again later when I'll share those updates about this data set. So again, there are two different ways to work with the meta content library data, or MCL data. You can access it through a web-based user interface, or you can use the API if you want to work with the data more programmatically. And that makes it, in my opinion, useful for a pretty wide range of researchers, depending on what they're trying to accomplish or how technical their workflow is. Now, the last data set here I want to mention is our collection of political and public figure tweets. So this includes tweets from politicians, celebrities, news media, and influencers from India and the United States. This data set is especially useful for people who are interested in things like, let's say, political communication and media narrative, or how public figures engage with audiences online. And we're still calling them tweets, even though the platform has changed names, because that's how most people still think about them, and that's how the data were named when they were published. In the next slide, here are a few more examples of data sets that are available through Social Media Archive, and these show some of the newer and emerging areas of research we are supporting. So the first one here is a Blue Start, which is based on Blue Sky. And just in case you're not familiar with Blue Sky, you can think of it as a newer social media platform that's very similar to Twitter or X, but it's built a little differently and still evolving. So this data set includes the full Blue Sky following network from early 2025, along with something called starter packs. So starter packs are basically curated lists of accounts that people can follow all at once, which, in my opinion, makes them very interesting from a network analysis perspective. So all of the users in this data set are anonymized, so researchers can focus on how networks are forming, how information is spreading, and how communities are emerging on newer platforms without having to deal with identifiable user data. So in my opinion, this is especially useful for anyone who is interested in studying social networks beyond the more established platforms like Facebook or Instagram. Another data set we have here looks at ChatGPT in education. And this one feels especially relevant because honestly, we're all using AI in some form or capacity right now. So this data set focuses on the kinds of concerns people are expressing on social media about using ChatGPT in educational settings. So it looks at what people are worried about, what kind of questions they're asking, and which accounts are part of those conversations. So the idea here is, if we're already using the AI tools in our classrooms, in our workplaces, and everyday life, it only makes sense for us to be able to study how people feel about them and how those conversations are playing out publicly. So this data set is really useful for researchers interested in AI policy, education, public discourse, especially around emerging technologies like AI. So our last data set here I want to mention is Beyond the Hashtags, that focuses on Twitter activity around Black Lives Matter movement, particularly during the Ferguson protests. So it includes a year of tweets that are tied to dozens of BLM-related keywords, and it captures how people discussed police violence, how people discussed protests and justice during those critical moments in 2014 and 2015. I think this data set gives researchers very useful way to understand how people talked about those events online and how different communities engaged with those topics and how those online discussions were connected to what was happening in the real world. So these are just a few examples of the kinds of data sets SOMAR currently supports, but hopefully they give you um, a sense of the scope and the variety of social media research you can do with the data sets that we host here at SOMAR. So I want to talk a little bit about the kinds of data SOMAR accepts, because this is something we get asked about a lot. And one thing that's really important to know here is that SOMAR accepts a broad scope of data. We are not really limited to data that comes directly from social media platforms in a very strict sense. So what I mean is that we think more broadly about what counts as social interaction and as online interaction. Now, of course, we do have data from platforms like Facebook and Instagram, which I have mentioned earlier. We also have data sets from Reddit, which is another space where people are actively interacting, people are sharing their opinions, and they're forming communities. But one example I really like is that we even have data from Amazon review sections. So we think about those reviews as a social space too, because people are engaging with each other's opinions. They are reacting to products and sharing experiences about products, about their experience in a very public way. So the way we usually frame it is, if your data is related to people interacting online, it's probably a good fit for SOMAR, because we take a broad view of what social media is and the different digital spaces where social interaction happens. And that allows us to support a wide range of research questions, because we are not limiting ourselves into this one rigid definition of what counts as social media platforms. All right, so now I want to shift gears a bit and talk about SOMAR's impact and global reach, just to give you all a sense of the scale of research and engagement that's happening throughout the archive. So starting with applications and the virtual data enclave, or VDE, usage, this graph gives us a quick snapshot of how researchers are engaging with social media archive. And as of 2025, as you can see, we have supported nearly 2,000 approved applicants, which really shows both the demand for social media data and the need to access that data securely. And out of those, 179 research teams actively used the Virtual Data Enclave, or VDE, during that period, which represented almost 600 individual users. So if you're not familiar with the VDE, it's essentially a secure computing environment where researchers can work with the restricted data or sensitive data without having to download the data to their own machines. I'll talk more about how the VDE works later in this presentation, but overall, I think it's pretty incredible to see the huge volume of active research happening within our infrastructure, and we're really, really proud of the role SOMAR plays in supporting this impactful work. So this slide, the statistics gives a quick snapshot of what user support looked like for us in 2025. And over the course of the year, we resolved more than 900 user support tickets just in our own ticketing system, which gives you a sense of how much direct interaction we have with researchers. And this is something I work on day to day. So it genuinely makes me very happy to be able to share these numbers, because I was a big part of this research and data access support. A large share of these requests focused on VDE support and the data access questions, which is pretty expected because more and more researchers are now working with our restricted data. So you can also see how much hands-on guidance goes into helping people successfully navigate and use SOMAR. And we are more than happy, to be hands-on and to have this opportunity to be able to support our research community. Moving to SOMAR's global reach, based on the application data, researchers using SOMAR infrastructure represent more than 100 countries worldwide, which I think really shows how international and global the research community around social media has been. And we have researchers all over the world using our services and working with us to carry out their important research. And it's honestly pretty incredible to see all that in one place. And in many ways, it feels like we have interacted with researchers across most of the world through SOMAR. The United States has the highest number of applicants or applications, followed by countries like the UK, Germany, and Brazil. But what really stands out is how widespread the participation has been across different regions. And it makes me very passionate to see all that. And, although SOMA is based in the US, we are really proud to be able to support research across Europe, Asia, Australia, and beyond. So this slide answers a really common question we get, which is what are researchers actually studying uses SOMAR data, right? So this word cloud is based on almost 9,000 unique research keywords that I pulled from our application data. So it's a pretty good snapshot of what the kinds of questions people are asking. So you'll notice a lot of familiar themes here. Things like social media, misinformation, sentiment analysis, political communication, hate speech. And these topics come up again and again across different disciplines and across different regions. And what's really interesting is that while political communication is a big focus, we also see a lot of work around health communication and climate change and machine learning and overall information integrity more broadly. So this really shows how social media archive supports research that kind of sits at the intersection of social media, public discourse, and how information spreads and shapes behavior online. So I think this is a good time to talk about SOMAR's broader technology ecosystem. So what I will walk through next are three main pieces: the website transition, the data deposit process, and the virtual data enclave. And you will see how together these pieces support the full research lifecycle from discovering data to depositing data to securely accessing and analyzing restricted data. And I'll break each of these down a bit so you can see how they all fit together and what they look like in practice. So I'd like to start with discussing a little bit about SOMAR's website. Our website has officially transitioned to the ICPSR platform. And with that, you will see a fresh look. It will give you an improved navigation and an updated search experience. And it will also have more streamlined tools for things like data deposit. So if you have visited the site recently, a lot of this would probably feel more intuitive and a lot easier to move through. So the main goal here was really to make it as simpler as possible for researchers to find what they need, understand our workflows, and get started more quickly. So just to give you a little background here, although SOMAR has always been part of ICPSR, our infrastructure used to be quite separate. So we were using different platforms for the website, for data deposits, and for applications, which, although gave us more flexibility, could feel a little bit fragmented at times. But now those systems are much better integrated. And all SOMAR resources and studies and features are now accessible through ICPSR's unified interface, which makes the experience, in my opinion, much smoother for researchers, especially if you're using data from other archives here at ICPSR, or you have somehow used ICPSR infrastructure in the past. So this slide zooms in a little bit more on the SOMAR website and navigation, just to give you all a sense of how things are organized now. So one thing I want to point out first is that we have kept our original SOMAR URL. So if you go to the old domain, socialmediaarchive.org, it will automatically redirect you to the SOMAR site on the ICPSR platform, so you don't really have to remember a new link. It will just take you where you need to go. And at the top of the page, you will see the main navigation menu. And this is really designed around the full, research lifecycle. So everything flows from how researchers typically move through a project. So you can start with search, where you will find all the data sets available through SOMAR. That includes both public data and restricted data. And from there, if you're interested in accessing something, the site guides you to the application information and access information, including the application guide and details on how to apply and share. So there are also sections for learning more about the SOMAR VDE or virtual data enclave, exporting files, accessing resources like Metacontent library. Beyond that, you'll also find FAQs, frequently asked questions, education and training materials, and of course, more background information about Social Media Archive. So the goal here really was to make it as easy as possible for researchers to explore, understand their options, and move from discovery to access without feeling lost or without feeling overwhelmed. Now I want to focus on the search feature on the SOMAR website, because that's really where all our data lives. So if you're looking for data sets, this is the first place you would want to go. From the search bar, you can browse everything that's available in the archive, including public data sets and the data sets that require an application. So each data set page clearly would show what the data is and how it can be accessed and what steps you need to take next. So whether you already know what you're looking for or you're just exploring what's out there, the search page is the easiest way to discover SOMAR data and start working with it. Another question we get asked a lot is how to tell whether a data set is public or restricted. So the easiest way to figure that out is directly from the dataset page itself. If you come here from the search results and click into a specific data set, you will see its access status right away. And you will see that information in the summary section, or if you scroll a bit further down to the notes, it will clearly say whether the data are public or if they're restricted and hence require an application. And if the data are restricted, the page does not leave you guessing. It will point you towards the application portal for you to apply, or the application guide if you want to know more about the application process. Now I want to briefly walk through the self-deposit process just to give you all a very high-level overview of how data actually gets into SOMAR. So the very first step is creating an ICPSR account or signing in if you already have one, because SOMAR now uses the same ICPSR login that I believe is called Researcher Passport System, that many of you may already be familiar with from other ICPSR archives. So there's no separate SOMAR specific account anymore. It's all part of the same single sign-on ecosystem, which is really nice. Once you are signed in, you will use the ICPSR Deposit Manager to start your submission. So from there, depositors complete a submission form that would walk them through the basics of their data sets, things like what the data are, where they came from, and how they can be shared. So our goal here is to make the process as consistent and familiar as possible, especially for researchers who already work with ICPSR, at the same time still having all the details that we need to curate and publish social media data responsibly and more transparently. So next, you upload your data and documentation. For files that are under 30 gigabytes, everything can be uploaded directly through the web interface. But if the files are larger than that, you just contact us and we'll help coordinate the whole transfer. And once everything is submitted, the dataset goes through a SOMAR review, where we make sure the metadata is complete and that the files and documentation and everything else is looking good. And once that review is complete, the data will be published and it will be made available to research community. Throughout this whole process, our team is very much hands-on, so the depositors are never really doing this alone. So just a few important things to keep in mind when you are depositing data into SOMAR. First, the self-deposit form is meant for public files only as of now. So if your dataset includes sensitive data or identifiable information and needs to be restricted, that's totally fine. You just don't upload those files directly through the form. Instead, you can reach out to us at somar-help@umich.edu, and we will work with you to figure out the best and the safest way to handle the data. So in general, a deposit should include three main pieces. You'll want to provide descriptive information about your data set so people understand what the data is about and how it can be used. And you'll also want to include documentation files like README files or codebooks, and then, of course, the data files themselves. And again, we are very hands-on throughout the whole process. So if you're ever unsure about, let's say, what to include and how to handle certain files, we're always happy to help. So now I want to talk a little bit more about the SOMAR Virtual Data Enclave, or VDE, because this is a really important part of how we support research with sensitive or restricted data. So at a very high level, the VDE is a secure remote research environment where researchers can analyze restricted social media data without that data ever leaving the system. So instead of downloading files to your own laptop or desktop, you kind of log into a secure virtual desktop and you do all your work there. So a very helpful way to think about it is that the data stays, locked in one safe and secure environment, and researchers come to the data rather than the data being sent out to researchers. So next point, the VDE is cloud-based. It is accessed through a remote desktop connection, and it does not allow any external internet access. And this part is very intentional because it helps us meet the strict privacy, security, and compliance requirements that we value so much for our users and for our data producers, especially because those data sets include sensitive information or restricted information. So even though you're working remotely, the environment itself is very controlled. So in terms of tools, the VDE is set up to support a wide range of research workflows. So researchers can work in R, they can work in Python, they can use familiar tools like RStudio, Jupyter Lab, Jupyter Notebooks. And if your project uses other software, we also support Stata and qualitative tools like MaxQDA, which can be added by request depending on the project's needs. Now, we also get a lot of questions about machine learning and AI, which honestly makes total sense since so many of the projects are using those methods now. The VDE can also support machine learning and AI tools as long as they follow ICPSR's security policy. So one newer feature we are especially excited about is the ability to work with certain machine learning models from Hugging Face. So this is something we have been actively building out as part of our IMLS, or Institute of Museum and Library Services grant work. So it really fits well within the theme of the new and expanded SOMAR features. So this allows researchers to request custom models or pre-trained models as long as they can run in an isolated environment without needing external internet access. And of course, all of these requests go through a security review, and once approved, SOMAR staff would handle uploading the models so researchers can use them safely inside the VDE. So researchers can also request to have their own code or their supplemental data uploaded into the VDE. So uploading your own data may only be permitted based on the data use conditions that are agreed upon with the data producers or depositors. So again, everything goes through a security review by ICPSR staff first to make sure it's safe to use in the VDE, and in some cases, the dataset itself doesn't allow researchers to continue to combine the restricted data with any external data at all. And when that's the case, we always encourage researchers to reach out to us so we can talk through, what's allowed and what's not. And finally, all the teams using the restricted data in the VDE are usually required to submit a restricted data use agreement or RDUA. So this is a formal agreement that outlines how the data can be used and how it needs to be protected. So it's signed by the principal investigator of the project and an institutional official from the university or the organization that you are associated with. So to support those agreements, the VDE has a number of built-in safeguards, like there's no external internet access, no copying and pasting from outside the environment, and no exporting files that may contain personally identifiable data, and no screenshots or screen sharing of any sort. So all of those restrictions are there because we want to protect the data, not because we want to make things, harder for researchers. So I think the VDE really gives researchers the best of both worlds. It allows people to do meaningful, high impact work with the restricted social media data without putting that data and people behind it at risk. All right, so this slide covers the costs associated with using the SOMAR virtual data enclave. So for projects, the VDE will cost around $371 per month. $371 per month. And that fee applies for the duration of the research project. And this monthly cost helps support the secure infrastructure, the computing resources, software access, technical support. There's also a one-time setup fee of $1,000, but that really only applies to teams that are onboarded after March 2026. And this setup fee helps cover the work involved in provisioning the environment, security reviews, getting everything ready before researchers even log in. So I also want to emphasize that we're always happy to talk through these costs with researchers early on, especially during the application stage, so there are no surprises later. And if you want more detail, including what's included and how billing works, we have a dedicated page on our website with a full overview of the VDE and its resources. All right, so here I will talk a little bit about SOMAR data access workflow. So if you want to access data from SOMAR, the first question we always ask is this data public or not? Now, if the data is public, if the answer is yes, the data is public, then great news. There's no application required. So you can search for it, you can download it, you can start working with it right away, but you do have to agree to ICPSR data use terms. But if the data is not public, then the next question becomes, can this data be accessed through a controlled download? If the answer is yes, then researchers submit a brief application. And once that's approved, we will provide you with a secure link that you can use to download the data securely and work with the data in your own computing environment, like your own laptop or desktop. But if the data cannot be downloaded because it's more sensitive or restricted, then that's where the virtual data enclave or VDE comes in. Now, in that case, researchers submit a full application and along with things like a restricted data use agreement or RDUA and IRB documentation. And I think the full form is Institutional Review Board. And once those are approved, the data is accessed securely inside the VDE rather than being downloaded. So the big takeaway here is that the access depends on the sensitivity of the data. So we try to match the level of review and the security to the level of risk. So our goal here is always to make access as straightforward as possible, while still protecting the data and the people represented in it. But if you are ever unsure which path your project falls under, that's exactly when we want you to reach out to us, because we help researchers figure this out all the time. All right, so before we wrap up, I want to share a quick update about the Meta-Content Library, or MCL, since this continues to be one of the most requested and most used data resource that we support. So at a very high level, like I mentioned, the Meta-Content Library provides access to a very large scale public content from Facebook and Instagram. And researchers use it to study everything from political communication and misinformation studies to content moderation and platform analysis, fact-checking, you name it. It's been incredibly popular, and that hasn't really changed. What has changed, though, is how the access is managed. Now, Meta has moved the Meta-Content Library and Content Library application process fully into their own system. So instead of having to apply through SOMAR, now researchers are applying directly through Meta's own application portal. So as I mentioned earlier, there are still two ways to access Meta-Content Library data. You can use the web-based user interface, or you can use the API. So access to the user interface is still entirely handled by Meta, and that part hasn't changed. What has changed is how API access is now handled. So when you apply for MCL API access, now you have to choose how you want to access the API data. And there are two options. First option is Meta Secure Research Environment, or SRE, and the second option is SOMAR's Virtual Data Enclave, or VDE. So you can choose one or the other, but you cannot choose both. So if you select Meta's SRE, or Secure Research Environment, during your application, everything stays within Meta's environment from start to finish. But if you select SOMAR's VDE during the application as your preferred platform for accessing the API data, Meta would still review the application, and they would approve your application first. And when that's approved, Meta would give you access to the user interface data, assuming you applied for that data as well. And then they would forward all your project information over to us here at SOMAR. And from that point on, SOMAR would handle the API access and the VDE onboarding. So you would have to complete a short API application form for this, and you have to agree to ICPSR's terms of service and data security plan. And you'll also have to provide us with a bit of basic information about your project. But you don't need any formal data agreement anymore for this data. And after that, we guide you through connecting to the VDE, logging in, accessing the API data from inside the SOMAR's VDE, including the instructions on how to use R, Jupyter Notebook in the VDE. And if you face any technical hiccups, we would also help you with troubleshooting and IT support. I have linked the Get Access page here. So the way to find this Get Access page is by going to Meta's developer website, which is developers.facebook.com. From there, you can use the search bar and type in Get Access. You will want to select the result that corresponds to the Meta-Content Library application guide. And that will take you to the correct Get Access page with the instructions on how to apply for this data. But for application-related questions, you also can reach out to Meta directly at Meta Research Applications at meta.com. So I have already mentioned it, but I'll say it again here just to emphasize that to work with Meta Content Library API data, now project teams have to use a secure computing environment. And there are two options. One is Meta Secure Research Environment, or SRE, which is a free Meta managed environment, and it works well for standard API-based research. The other option is SOMAR's Virtual Data Enclave, or VDE, which is a paid environment, but it offers more flexibility and more tools and more computing capacity for projects that might need them. So for any given project, researchers choose only one of those environments. You cannot split work across both, but which one of these platforms makes sense for your project would really depend on the scope and the needs of your project. So we also have clear documentation and resources that would walk you through what kind of functionality is available in each of these platforms, along with any limitations researchers should be aware of. All right, so here I just want to highlight that none of this work happens in isolation. SOMAR is really the result of very strong partnerships with organizations like Meta, ICPSR, the Knight Foundation, AWS, and other teams across the University of Michigan. And these collaborations make it possible for us to support complex, secure, and large-scale social media research. And we are incredibly grateful for the expertise and support all of our partners bring to everything we do here at SOMAR. And finally, before we wrap up, I just want to share a few ways to stay in touch with us. Our website, socialmediaarchive.org, is always the best place to find updates and to explore datasets and learn more about our workflows. If you ever have any questions, you can always reach out to us directly at somar-help@umich.edu. And that inbox goes straight to our team, and we genuinely enjoy hearing from researchers and talking through ideas or questions. We also encourage you to sign up for our email lists, and that's where we share SOMAR announcements, new data releases, upcoming events, and other updates. So you can use the QR code on this slide to sign up. If you're not able to scan the QR code, or if you're viewing this later and the code isn't accessible somehow, you can also visit socialmediaarchive.org. From there, you can click on FAQ in the top navigation, and you'll find a section that called Staying Informed, with a direct link to sign up. And with that, thank you all so much for spending time with me today. I really appreciate your interest in SOMAR, and we are always excited to support the work you're doing. And thanks, Allison and Chloe, again for helping me host this webinar today. Now I'm happy to take any questions, and I know Allison has been monitoring our Q&A section. So Allison, I would appreciate it if you could read a few of the questions so we can address them. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I am Alison Sweet. As did I mention, I am a senior project manager for SOMAR. So it was my pleasure to help today with the webinar and monitor the question. I have answered about 6 things so far, but there are still a few questions remaining here. So today, I am thinking that you could potentially take this if you know. One person said, is it okay to do vibe coding with SOMAR data? I am not familiar with vibe coding, and I'm wondering if you are. Did I?
Yeah, so I think it comes down to the AI policy. I think it has something to do with AI. So like I said, like I mentioned in my presentation, you are allowed to work with AI data inside the VDE as long as these AI models can run in isolation without needing external internet access. And those AI models have to go through SOMAR's reviews, and they have to follow ICPSR's AI policy. I think if you happen to know the link for ICPSR's AI policy, you could put it in the chat if you can. Or
Yes, I will see if I can find it, unless Chloe can find it very quickly. While I'm reading another question, are you ready for me to proceed with the next question, Jadar?
yes, I am. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to read this next one. This is something that I think you might be more familiar with. I was wondering whether you currently have any data on numerical indicators related to user AI generated content, AICC, engagement or acceptance. It seems that much of the AI-related data from social media is primarily text-based. Are there any particular challenges in collecting numerical indicators?
Yeah, that is a good question. Off top of my head, I can't really think of any data that that have numerical indicators. But we are always open to depositing new data. So we are currently working on having more deposits in. So we might have it in future. That would be my answer. Would you want to add anything to that, Allison?
I don't have anything to add, but I would suggest to the person who asked the question to maybe reach out to SOMAR through somar-help@umis.edu if they would like to talk more about it, because it might be easier for our team to work with this person to determine whether we have the data for them or maybe learn more about their needs. So that would be my suggestion. Okay, are we ready for the next question?
Yeah.
I might be able to take this one if you need to. This purchase, I am interested in doing social network analysis on Facebook. You see comments and reactions by user as edges, which are connections between Facebook groups. So the VDE allows you to trace these connections using Python or are these data restricted? Thank you.
Yes. I believe that you would be able to doing your social network analysis using Facebook comments. We do support, so the relevant data set would be meta content library API data. Now you can use the web-based user interface, but like I said, it's web-based and it's very limited in scope. So I think API data would be the best suit for this research question, and you can do it. The VDE would allow the connections using Python because we do support Python inside the VDE. And although this data would be public, but for our own data security policies, the data would be accessed inside the VDE. So in that regard, it would be considered restricted. So like I mentioned, you can access API data either through Meta's Secure Research Environment or SRE or through Virtual Data Enclave or VDE. And you have to apply through Meta. And the Get Access page is the place where you want to check out how to apply. And Meta has their own application process and application documentation, which will guide you through, how to apply and what are the things that you need. And once you are applying, you should also choose between SRE and VDE. And if you think that VDE is appropriate for the kind of analysis that you want to perform, then yes, you can request or apply for this data, and we can facilitate for you to, get access to API data inside the VDE where you can use Python to perform that kind of analysis.
I agree with Didar here, and I could tell you from my experiences around React review output from the BDE, there have been some network analyses with researchers using Python, so that has been successful in the past. All right. Now there's another question related to vibe coding, Didar. So this might be for you too. Vibe coding uses Claude AI models for coding. Can we use this with SOMAR data that are publicly available, not through the VDE?
Yeah, I mean, when you're downloading public data from SOMAR, you have to agree to ICPSR's data use agreement. And I think you also have to follow ICPSR's AI use policy. So that link is very important. I'm gonna have to find that link and forward it to this user. And that would probably have a more concrete answers whether or not they are able to use that kind of AI models with our public data. If as long as it follows ICPSR's AI policy, you should be good to use it or not use it.
Yeah, I found the link Didar, so you might have to share it. You or Chloe may have to share it. So please find that link to the chat box, and then one of you could share it with the audience. That was all of the questions that were the Q&A during this time. So we still have a couple of minutes left. If anyone else has any further questions.
Okay. We have reached the end of our webinar. We'd like to thank you all for joining us and thank Didar for his time and expertise, as well as Allison for her time and expertise. Thank you all for being here and enjoy the rest of your day.